There's been very, very stark examples of how women's human rights have been seriously abused and violated in Irish society. The first being like the tragic death of Savita Halappanavar, which led to a public outcry for ex-case legislation. And it's important to remember that even if this legislation is actually introduced, it will leave Ireland with the most restrictive regime in the world for access to abortion services. So we must remember this, and we need to look further than this and go towards whether we need a referendum or not on this on this matter. There's also the issues of the Magdalen laundries, and we have representatives from it here today. That is just a national shame on this country that we have tolerated that situation for such a long time, and the courage that these women showed and the perseverance that they showed in bringing the government to account, and for that public apology that has made such a difference. But also just to mention the austerity that has affected women. The last budget was anti-women. It has crippled women, it has crippled communities, it has crippled families, and women have really, really suffered under this budget. The cuts to the health budget, these particularly affect women too, because women are more likely to be poor, more likely to be disadvantaged, more likely to be in low earning employment. So this is really hitting women badly. One thing I'd like to also mention is the cuts to violence against women sector. Over the last 3 years, there's been a 35% cut in women's services, including like refuges and so forth, while at the same time there's been a 40% increase in the instances of domestic violence and violence against women. In this country, 42% of women have experienced sexual abuse in their lifetime. That's a very, very stark statistic, and the government are really doing very little about this. We need to feel safe in our homes. We need to feel safe in the streets of Dublin, in the streets all around Ireland. So the government must make this a top priority. And to go back to the abortion issue, we need to remember that thousands and thousands of women who every year travel to the UK and to other countries to access abortion that they cannot access in their own country. This causes severe physical, psychological and financial impact on women. And we just cannot just ignore this. The government really need to act. The first step is legislation to give effect to the X case, but we need to have further action after that, because this is absolutely unacceptable in 2013.
And come from a campaign called Rape is No Joke. And the reason that we launched this campaign is that every year in Britain, 85,000 women are raped, and it happens to 1 in 4 women in their lifetime. And as women, we're constantly told to be careful about where we go, what we do, what we wear, how we act. And so when women are attacked, we're told that it's our fault, that we made ourselves appear sexually available and that a man couldn't control himself. And comments like the one that was made by a police officer in Toronto that sparked off the slut walk demonstrations, that if women want to avoid being raped, they should avoid dressing like sluts. These comments are widespread in our societies. From the gang rape in India of a 23-year-old student, which was justified by some because she was a woman who dared to get an education, to Egypt, where there have been mass sexual assaults against women who have taken part in the protests, and that's been justified because they were wearing tight clothing. So what do they expect? And to the US, where senators justify rape as being God's will, and to the comedian in Edinburgh, such as Daniel Tosh, who thought that it would be funny to imagine a woman in his audience being raped and justified it as being just a joke. And all of these things reinforce the false idea that the victim is to blame, that rape is inevitable and that is no big deal. So Rape is No Joke campaigns against these ideas. We bust the myths around rape, that it's not about sexual attraction, it's about power and control. It's about a society that teaches men they have to be in control, are the head of the family and stronger than women. And we point out that the most likely place for a woman to be attacked is not on the street, but in her own home, and that the victim is never to blame. And we demand that women shouldn't have to laugh along politely to comedians trivialising rape. And we stand to challenge these ideas as one part of fighting sexism and fighting for real equality. Because in the context of austerity, where in Britain there is a 31% cut in funding for rape services, where refugees are turning away 230 women a day because they don't have any space, and when special units that deal with rape in the police are being cut, we have to say that rape is no joke. But what we do point out is that in all of those examples that I've given, in India, in Egypt, and the slot walks, in Ireland, in Britain and everywhere else in the world, what they've shown is that women are prepared to fight this, that women are prepared to stand up and demand rights, and that men and women can unite together in movements against sexism, against rape, but also against austerity as well. So I think, the protest today is excellent, but it needs to be one step, the first step towards a campaign to demand, real abortion rights, and campaigning against victim blaming and all other attacks on women and fighting against austerity.
In the year 2013, we cannot safely access abortion in this country when we need it. It is beyond me that this is the case. It is beyond me that in 21 years since the passing of the X case, which is our way of saying 21 years since it has been established that a woman has a right to an abortion if the pregnancy endangers her life. 21 years since a woman's right to not die rather, because she is pregnant has been established. We are still fighting for this right to be given legal access to. It is beyond me that this is happening. This legislation for the X case is eventually going to be passed. It's going to be passed, we've heard, in July. And that will be celebrated, but it's not a victory. It's not a victory that we finally get access to abortion when we might be about to die. How is that a victory? It's just, there aren't words for it. To be forced to the edge of death before they will consider offering you an abortion for a pregnancy that is endangering your life. Your health is not something that you're entitled to an abortion for, by the way. If your health is endangered from a pregnancy, tough. That isn't something that comes into the issue here. That's what the abortion rights campaign is about. It's about accessing abortion that is safe and legal in this country, regardless of where you stand on the abortion issue. I mean, surely you must acknowledge that the 5,000 to 6,000 women who are forced to travel a year without adequate healthcare and backup when they come back home here, who were forced to find up to €1,200 out of their own pocket to travel away from their own country in horrific circumstances, absolutely horrific circumstances. For example, the campaign, which you'll all have heard of, the Termination for Medical Reasons campaign, who is formed by families who were forced to leave this country and go to another country, mostly the UK, when they were told that they're very much wanted and loved pregnancies were diagnosed with various conditions that were incompatible with life. This is something that has come up time and time again in this country. We saw it in the Miss D case in 2007, in which case, by the way, in the European courts, the Irish government argued that Miss D would have been able to access abortion under Irish law because her pregnancy was incompatible with life, and yet now they're telling us that actually, no, sorry, we're not going to talk about that. We can't do that because it's not compatible with our constitution. It seems to me that they'll pretty much say anything, regardless of its consistency with earlier cases, to just avoid acting on this issue, and I don't understand why. I really don't. 85% of the Irish people in polls consistently support the bare minimum, the very basic legislation for the X case. Legislation to protect women's lives where her life is in danger from her pregnancy. It's not difficult. This is not a complex issue. If a woman is going to die because she is pregnant, she should have safe, legal, accessible abortion available to her in the country from which she is from. And yet we're being forced to struggle and we're being forced to fight for this. We will get there, we will attain it. And then the next step is access to abortion where a woman's health is at risk. Again, this is very basic, very, very, very bare minimum stuff. Women should be able to access abortion where they request it, where their health is at risk, or where their pregnancy has a fatal abnormality where it's incompatible with life. Again, really basic stuff. Not something we should be having to fight for in the year 2013, but we are, and we will get there. From then on, we want to see safe, legal, accessible abortion available to all women in this country, where they request it, without having to jump through hoops to get it. It's a basic human dignity. Having recently been pregnant myself, I gave birth to my daughter at the end of December, and having been campaigning all during my pregnancy, I don't understand how anyone could want to force a woman to go through with a pregnancy and childbirth she did not want to carry with every fibre of her being. Because let me tell you that even when you want to do that, even when you do want that pregnancy with every fibre of your being, it is incredibly difficult. And I had no complications with my pregnancy. I had what was a healthy, normal pregnancy with a beautiful, healthy, normal baby daughter, and even still, it is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Those who would force pregnancy on women are barbaric. Forced pregnancy is slavery. That's the end of it. Abortion rights for all women in this country now.
As a woman, a sister and a Magdalene survivor, I am even more delighted to be here with a success story for many who struggled the battle. Let us not forget our sisters all over the world who are fighting so many battles, and the battles that are yet to be won in our land. Let me tell you my story, the story of thousands of Irish women on the hands of the church and the state. My story is, I was 12 years old and I was being abused in the home. My father had died, my mother had remarried, and when a nun said I was pale and withdrawn, and she told me I could trust her, as a 12-year-old innocent child, of course I broke down and I trusted her. She called the local priest and he said, well, I wasn't a part of the family unit as my father had died, that my mother had to look after the children in her new family and that I had to be forgotten about. So they decided to send me to a Magdalene laundry where I spent 5 years. Got out when I was 16 when I asked for wages. And then I was left on the streets back to where I was being abused. Then I headed to England and I carried this terrible torment with me for 30 years in England. I arrived back home to Ireland and I went on a bit of a rampage to get an apology for what had been done to me. It was a hard struggle, but I got there and we got the apology, and now the church is getting annoyed at us again. It's on the Irish Times today that how they've done a good job for us, which is lies, and they made no money. Untrue, they're protecting their money now. So, and one thing I think is very important, I think the silence in the home can be the worst thing. Everybody speak out, don't be afraid. Okay, bless you.
I was in 5 institutions for a crime that was committed against me by a man, and I was punished for the crime that he was sexually abusing me. I was reintegrated in the institutions, I was beaten, starved, I was made to feel that I was sinned, I was the one to blame. Then when I left every institution, I was eventually then sent to the Magdalene laundry. I was also abused there, starved, beaten. No one would believe me when I came out because I was a woman. I should have been grateful that they took me in because I had no father. My mother was an unmarried mother. And not alone that, did they rob me from everything there. They robbed me from the love of my daughter, because when I got out I hid, ran around the streets and hid on everywhere, different names, terrified that they would find me and bring me back to the Magdalenes. When my baby was born, I gave it to my mother. I was terrified to even stay with my baby in case they take the two of us and put us away. They put the fear of God into us, and hopefully when I was thinking that they were caring, I just read the Irish Times today, and I just can't believe what the nuns said. They actually even slandered us by saying they took us in because we were street women. I was not a street woman at 16, and I really feel so bad that again, as a woman, I'm being degraded. But I'm a survivor of 5 homes, Magdalene's. I'll always be a survivor. They broke my spirit, my body, but they'll never break my spirit.
Those who know me know I'm rarely stuck for a word to say, but after listening to Maureen and Martina, I am struggling actually to speak, because anytime we hear the plight of those women, it just brings home what a corrupt, closed, priest-ridden, church-ridden society that we had in this country for so many years. Now today is International Women's Day, and there's a very, very powerful woman in town. Her name is Christine Lagarde. Now Christine Lagarde is celebrating International Women's Day. She celebrated it by meeting some of the female members of Cabinet. Now to hear those women talking about International Women's Day was an absolute insult. International Women's Day began in 1909 in America. It was a celebration, and it was actually called International Working Women's Day. It was a celebration of the battle women had waged in a textile workers' strike the previous year, as women were joining unions and improving their pay and conditions, which was obviously worse than men's. So to hear Christine Lagarde, who's throwing millions of people, including women, into poverty on a daily basis, is absolutely incredible. This is an organisation, the IMF, that goes into countries, and when it goes into those countries, the rate of tuberculosis goes up by 13%. The number of doctors in a country goes down by 8%. That's the effect of Christine Lagarde, the IMF, and these women who are carrying out austerity. They certainly don't speak, I think, for the people here. Now when we heard Maureen and Martina speaking, what happened to the Magdalene women? Their crimes were twofold. They were women and they were poor. So they were being discriminated on the basis of their gender and on the basis of their class. And that was their crime. James Larkin, who we see up here, who led lots of women workers and was a very good representative for women, put it succinctly: women are the slaves of slaves. And we believe in the Rosa campaign and in the Socialist Party, which set it up, but obviously we would like others to now, build it as well with us, that to get rid of the oppression facing women around the planet, we have to get rid of the system that's responsible for it. Even issues like violence against women, which is the theme of International Women's Day 2013. As was said earlier, 42% of women experience such violence, but only 8% report it. I think that says it all. That's a huge issue that has to be addressed, and is it any wonder when you see judgments that were handed down to Fiona Doyle, for example, earlier this year, another woman who experienced horror in her own home at the hands of her own father. Rape and violence against women, as was said, is about power and control, nothing to do with sexual urges or what a woman is wearing. To deal with the position of women in society, we have to have zero tolerance of violence against women. Zero. Not some tolerance, but absolutely zero. But we can only do that when we create a society where women are equal. That means getting rid of capitalism. For example, how can you have equal pay, free childcare, reproductive rights where, contraception will be provided for free and be freely available? Only when those things are provided could women have the same freedom as men. But that's only possible if the resources that we have in society are organised in the interests of the majority, not for the profit of a few. Because we found, and we will see even more with austerity biting, that those things that were fought in the past in the 1960s and 1970s by women and achieved will now be put under attack. We see it with the attack on child benefit,
the first thing to go is always women and families to be attacked. Now in America, there's 17 million women in poverty, and there's 12 million men in poverty. So you can see straight away a terrible inequality there. For every 1% increase in poverty, 1.5, you can't have half a person, but 1.5 babies, boy babies, die out of 1,000, but the figure is 7.5 when you apply it to girls. But that doesn't mean that we want to share out the poverty so that there's more boys suffering. Of course not. We want an equal society. We want to share out the wealth and create a whole new system to end a profit system that benefits the 1% over the 99%. You know, to have a society where the millions, not the millionaires, are in control. To organise a society that would provide clean water. Did you know every single day 200 million hours are spent by girls fetching water for their families? That's why they can't go to school. It's for no other reason. They can't receive an education. The basic right of clean water, you know, which would totally free up so much of that labour, could transform people's lives, can't be achieved when you have a few millionaires controlling such massive wealth, as Oxfam reported recently. Now finally, the last point I'd make is in relation to the Rosa campaign. Rosa is fighting on the key issues affecting women. We saw this year, as has been mentioned, the tragic death of Savita, which Sinead mentioned, which brought 20,000 people onto the streets within a few days. We propose and we believe that women's health is the key. Actually, X is not enough and would not guarantee a situation like Savita's would not happen again, because there's a difference being made, a distinction being made between the life and the health of a woman. Women in Pakistan, women in Burkina Faso, the poorest country on the planet, have actually got a right to abortion on the grounds of health. And yet we politicians in this country telling us that it's just far too liberal and it can't be done. These backwoods men and backwoods women have to be completely wiped out from those decisions. They're way, way behind where people are at. And also I would appeal to people to fight with us on the issues of abortion rights, to stop violence against women, but to create a whole new society where we could have a complete change in culture, brought about by the economic emancipation of the vast majority of people, men and women. To please get involved with us. If you're in a college, if you're in a housing estate, set up a stall with us, take up a petition with us, bring in some of the Rosa newsletters, come up to the desk here and find out more about how we can build this campaign and how we can fight for the emancipation and the freedom of women after so many years. Thanks a million. Bye.